Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are back with another episode of Daily Palantir, and we have a lot to discuss in the world of Palantir today. I want to give a quick shout out to the people who are liking these daily videos. I'm really liking getting all the news and putting it in one video and then just putting it out there. And then if you're not interested, you can skip to the different chapters you like. For all the people that watch the entire thing, my heart is yours. Thank you all for listening. Thank you all for watching. And I like this format, so we're going to keep rolling with this format and see how it does. Today, we're going to talk about a couple things. Number one, price action on Palantir fell below 17 bucks at 16.80 at one point and then started to recover back above 17. So we're going to talk about that. Number two, we're going to talk about Palantir on Sunday buying a New York Times advertisement full page and basically reaffirming, doubling down on their support for Israel. And we're going to be listening to Dan Ives, one of the most famous Palantir analysts, who has a $25 price target on the stock, the biggest price target on the stock from an analyst, discuss his thoughts on the relationship between Israel and Palantir. Then we're going to talk about the NHS. Apparently, a new article came out on Sunday that there is a different company in Great Britain that has a competitive bid for Palantir and is likely going to get this 480 million euro contract or pound contract. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And then finally, a Wall Street Journal piece that just broke a couple of hours ago around Palantir software being used in a proprietary way with a new company that's working in tandem with Palantir to build a new type of investment company. We've got a lot to get into. Let's get into it. All right, to start off, we're going to talk about the stock action today. $17.31 after hours, closed at $17.37, so down just a little bit after hours. Why did we see a little bit of a decline? As you can see today, we saw $16.67 on the lows. And the reason I think we hit 1667, quite frankly, is because the entire market started to tank. There were a lot of interesting things that happened today. There was a spot ETF approval of Bitcoin, and that's what caused Bitcoin to go to the moon. And then that apparently wasn't true, or that was fake news. So all the Bitcoin companies, all the mining companies were going up. Bitcoin at one point was $29,915. It was 45 bucks away from hitting that $30,000 range. And then it came back down. So we saw a lot of volatility in the market overall. We ended up having a pretty green day. S&P 500 up 1.05% and up in after hours at 436.26. Palantir fell to about 1667, and then from there it rebounded to the 1737 range. Now, why is this important? To me, this is all about capitulation. If Palantir can capitulate over the next couple weeks and months from the $16 to $18 range, that means we're likely out of the territory of being stuck within 14 to 16, which, if you remember, after earnings, when we were at basically $20, right as earnings came and earnings weren't that good, we collapsed all the way down to $14.15 after a matter of 11 days, $14.15. And then from August 11th all the way until the end of September, we were basically stuck from 14 to 15. We got to the lows of $13.90, but we never really got below $13.90. So that was kind of the floor for Palantir stock. Did management do some buybacks? Did we potentially have more investors come in? We know some public investors, obviously Kathy Wood was buying, but we don't know if management did any buybacks, and we'll know about that on the next earnings call, which is on November 2nd. But that did establish a floor. Now, when we see momentum to the downside on Palantir, today 1667, and then it rebounds back to 17, maybe 16 is becoming that floor. I think it's too early to tell if 16 or 17 is the floor for the stock. I think when we were for almost 2 months stuck from 14 to 16, that was a general understanding of, okay, if it falls below 15, I've been saying publicly, I like it as a buy, because I was looking at what was happening with the price pattern. 12, 11 just seemed like it was not going to happen given the recent momentum of the company and obviously the increased growth when it comes to AIP clients. So nice rebound today from 1667 back up to 1730. If we can capitulate in that range and then move forward from there, we're going to see some decent price action going in the future if that becomes the bottom. But so far, that is what we're seeing on Palantir stock, and we'll see later if that happens. Volume today was 44.8 million shares exchanged hands, and we ended at a $37.3 billion market cap. Okay, biggest news of the day. This is what I tweeted out yesterday. If you're not following me on Twitter, please make sure you follow me on Twitter. You're going to get the Palantir updates. And you're also going to get updates on pretty much anything I'm talking about. I went to Cheesecake Factory, and so you saw my cheesecakes on Saturday. By the way, Coke at Cheesecake Factory, Coca-Cola, $5 a glass. It's like, this inflation thing's getting a little ridiculous to pay $5 for a glass of Coke. All right, Palantir has bought an ad for the Sunday New York Times showing their support for Israel. This tweet kind of caused some controversy. As you can see, 109,000 views, 139 retweets, 1,000 likes, 89 replies. I had some people saying, how could Palantir be supporting, a genocidal state? I had other people saying this is the best thing that Palantir has ever done. There was a lot of responses around what is going on with Palantir, but this was Palantir's Sunday New York Times edition of an advertisement that they put out for the full page. Now, a little bit of context here. The Sunday New York Times advertisements I don't want to say they're like Super Bowl advertisements, but they are kind of the more premier advertisements that exist in print media. Why is this the case? Usually on Sunday is when people tend to go buy the New York Times, the print media version, and the ads that are on the full page, meaning they take up the entire page of the Sunday New York Times print edition, end up kind of circulating. They can sometimes go viral on social media. And the reason is not because the New York Times has that much distribution when it comes to the amount of newspapers it actually sells. In fact, I think if they had like put $100,000, which I believe is the estimated cost, $100,000 to $150,000 to actually buy a New York Times full page Sunday edition print ad. If they just put that into like LinkedIn ads, I think it might have even done better reach for them. But the reason a company does that is to get a certain level of prestige. The New York Times, whether we like it or not, I personally don't care that much about it. The reason Palantir cares about it is because head executives, CFOs, CMOs, people that are still important in the world of business, essentially executive decision makers, are reading that newspaper, whether we like it or not. And they will have and make decisions on the future trajectory of their company. And if Palantir software can be an important world of their company, then that's something where Palantir wants to get those brand impressions on those executives. They're not really looking for direct performance campaigns here. AIP bootcamps, their go-to-market strategy of actually convincing people to buy the product, is much more different from a marketing perspective and has a totally different cost than buying a full page ad in the New York Times. The people they want to see that ad are the people they believe that will come inbound and be like, hey, I saw you support Israel, and I'm curious what you do around AI and machine learning, right? That type of inbound, they're looking for these types of advertisements. Quick example here, Meta ended up buying a ton of front page advertisements a couple years ago on the New York Times on the Sunday edition when Apple had implemented their iOS 14 privacy changes. So basically Apple was like, hey, that's going to ask you if you want to be targeted. And it was basically gutting Facebook's entire business of actually allowing targeted advertising at scale. They ultimately figured out a way from that, right? So Facebook doesn't have to rely on Apple too much anymore. But at the time, it was seen like it was going to be really detrimental to their business. That actually influenced investors to not buy the stock, right? Because if Facebook has horrible ad targeting, advertisers won't pay anymore. So Facebook's not going to have the type of revenue growth that it saw over the previous years. So what Facebook did when they created that advertisement in the New York Times is they focused on small businesses. They talked about Joe's Pizza Shop or a local diner or something like that. And they were basically like, these are the people that are basically going to go out of business if Apple implements this change. Now, were they going to go out of business? Was that dramatic? Probably not. But their overall point was, look, you may think Facebook's this evil giant corporation that just wants to steal your data, but in reality, we just want to steal your data so we could get customers to better find products that are suited to them. And if you're in New Jersey and there's a local diner and they can reach you because of our technology, given you have ad targeting, that's why our ad targeting is good. So they put out an entire campaign across the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, all these like big media publications that you and me might not really care about that much. Actually, I read the Wall Street Journal. I do like the Wall Street Journal, but mainstream media still has a hold on people, and it still affects decision makers, and they can still charge upwards from $100,000 to $200,000 for one print page ad that is going to maybe be seen by a couple 100,000 people, which is like okay, in order to get the level of prestige, because the brand of the New York Times, the brand of the Wall Street Journal, the brand of a Bloomberg is still substantial. So Palantir is doubling down on that by making this advertisement. Now, one of the things I saw in the Twitter post is a lot of people were concerned that Palantir is mixing too much of business with politics. And while that may be the case, I think if Palantir tweeted a couple days ago, "We stand with Israel," there is no way they can't double down on this sort of statement, right? Freedom, Western democracy, liberty, humanity. Ultimately, they believe that the terrorist attacks from Hamas have threatened the very sovereignty and concept of democracy that exists in Israel. That is Israel's 9/11. And by the way, if you see some of this POV view of Hamas actually committing some of these atrocities, these first-person POV scenes, I've seen them over the weekend. I've been studying the situation a lot. And it's really heartbreaking. I mean, just like imagine yourself hiding your kids in the back room, hoping the terrorists don't come in. They're shooting at all the windows, and then they finally find you. And it's a tough situation to imagine as a human being in that situation. They did that to 1,300 people. So you may disagree with how the Israeli government is going and how they're responding, what's going on in Gaza, how they're telling citizens to leave, all this stuff that's going on. But I think what Palantir doesn't agree with, or agrees with, even if they don't agree with all of the applications of how Israel is conducting their operations to retaliate, is they believe that the idea, the ethos that we want to end Hamas, just like we wanted to end Al-Qaeda after 9/11, is something that should be affirmed. And at the end of the day, is something their software can help with. And they are on the side of protecting democracy in the context of Israel and making sure an organization like Hamas can never conduct those terrorist attacks. So everyone has a different perspective and a different belief on what Israel is doing or how they're doing it or how they feel about the Palestinian-Israeli conflict. But at the end of the day, Palantir has taken a stance. Will they lose some business from that? Maybe. But will they also gain a lot of business from taking a hardline stance against terrorism in their concept of thinking what is terrorism, what is right, what is wrong? I think yes, because they took that hardline stance against China and Russia a long time ago. And look what happened with Ukraine. Look what happened with how they're being prompted to get ready to help in the China-Taiwan potential fiasco that's seemingly going to happen in 2027. It seems like for them, taking an ethical stance wasn't a choice. It's something they had to do. Now, we also had an analyst that we all know named Dan Ives, who went on Bloomberg and spoke about the relationship between what's going on in the Middle East and Palantir. And we are going to see and hear what he has to say. A quick fun fact, this guy in the middle right here, he hates Palantir. He called them an evil company, spy company, all that stuff. So he was a little bit more reserved this time as Dan Ives came on the program. But in the past, when Dan Ives wasn't there, he definitely said some interesting things about Palantir. All right, let's listen to what Dan Ives has to say.
I want to focus in on Palantir in particular, because with the conflict in the Middle East, you say that Palantir will be a key partner of Israel. We already know Palantir is a key partner of the U.S. government as well. Is it limited in any way in terms of how many governments it can partner with?
Well, it's not. Look, let's take a step back. As a pure play AI name, it's probably the best software out there from core AI, what Karp and Palantir have done. When it comes to defense, that's clearly their strength, right? So they will be the eyes and ears, especially for Israel, IDF. We've seen that in the U.S. as well. I mean, Palantir, you talk about defense budgets.
Real quick, when Dan Ives says they're going to be the eyes and ears for the IDF, I don't necessarily know how to take it, because this is a guy who either is very connected and knows that this is going to happen, and he's kind of giving some information about like, yeah, I think this is probably going to be the case, or he's hypothesizing and imagining based on what happened in Ukraine that Palantir is also going to take up this role in Israel. Maybe he's hypothesizing, maybe he's giving a little bit of details based on the people he's talking to, but I don't think his assumption that Palantir could be the eyes and ears of the IDF is crazy, especially the defense minister of Israel came out today and said this is going to be a very long war. This is not ending anytime soon. And if it's going to be a very long war, you would imagine they need a lot of software to help them to conduct their operations, and that might just end up going to Palantir.
And where this is all going, strategically the top of the list. And I think it just shows more and more, even as they've gone into enterprises. Palantir, I still believe, is a very underappreciated story by investors that really don't understand what could really be the full, what I believe, AI story playing out here.
I am curious about that, too, because I understand that there's a certain black box with this company that is kind of a necessity, given some of what they do here. But I also feel that we don't necessarily hear enough sometimes from the executives there. We don't see them as much here. Does that matter to you?
Yeah, look, I think there's no doubt. I think by nature of what they do, there's a lot of stuff that they can talk about. I do believe they have started, we were at a customer conference, a month or two ago. I mean, they've started to be a little, from an investor perspective, a little more open. But I think that's going to be part of the story. I mean, if you look at Karp and Palantir building, and we've called it, what I view as probably one of the gems in AI, and I think it's just starting here. Defense was actually their roots. Enterprise and going forward, that's really going to be a lot of the core growth. We believe this is really going to be an AI revolution with Palantir playing a major role.
Dan Ives is very, very excited for what the world is going to look like in the context of AI and how Palantir is going to play a role there. When Dan Ives says they're a gem of a company when it comes to AI, again, he talks to a lot of CIOs, a lot of decision makers, and that's how he comes to his conclusions. The other interesting thing is when Dan Ives put out that $25 price target, I thought it was great. I was like, all right, awesome. We got Dan covering the stock. He's pretty bullish, called them the Messi of AI. Next thing I know, on Q2 earnings, he's one of the main people, along with Bank of America's Mariana, asking a question. And I didn't think a guy who put out a price target on them immediately gets to ask a question. Like, that's a very privileged position to be an analyst where you get to ask a question on the earnings call. So I do think that you could have whatever opinion you want on Dan Ives. He's connected in the industry. He understands what's going on. If you're one of the guys being allowed to ask a question, it means the company also thinks fondly of you, which means the company in general thinks you're one of the guys that understands the business in a better light than most analysts. So Dan Ives, that $25 price target, I don't know if we're going to hit that this year, if we're going to hit that next year, whatever it may be. It's usually a 1-year price target. He put that out when it was at like $19 back in July, and we saw the dip, and now we're kind of back to that $17, $18 level. But it is really interesting him talking about the relationship that Palantir will potentially be having with the IDF. Again, if this war is long, then Palantir, I think, would be a piece of software that is procured. The question becomes, is this a quick operation and we move on? And as much as I would hope that's the case, if you actually do some research on Hamas, look at all the funding they have, look at what they're doing with civilians, it's likely going to be a very bloody war that's going to last for some time. I mean, we stayed in Iraq for 11 years. Now, I hope it doesn't last that long. And I don't think Hamas is as crazy as Al-Qaeda at the time. But we will ultimately see what happens. And if Palantir software can speed up that process and make Israel win, which is the ultimate goal, then this might actually lead to increased revenue and contracts for Palantir. Okay, next piece of news. We got an article posted by The Times in the UK. The title is, "Will Handle NHS Data Better Than Americans, Quantexa Says." Quantexa, for those that don't know, this was posted on Sunday, is this like British UK company that thinks they're like really cool, and like in reality, they're not. My Palantir shareholder bias is coming out here, but this is the company. Unified data and drive AI-enabled decision making. Obviously sounds like Palantir, right? So their whole thesis is like, we can take all your data, blah, blah, blah. We can give you insights, decisions, all that stuff. I personally, so people have been asking me today, hey, Amit, this article came out. Do you think like the deal is going to go to Quantexa? I personally do not think that's happening. I think this deal is going to Palantir. We are in mid-October. We should be getting an update from the NHS soon. They did say we would get an update in mid-October. It's literally a day after the 15-day mark of October, so we are in the middle of October. So I think this week we should get an update, and if not, then hopefully next week. But I don't think Quantexa is necessarily a challenger. I read the article. Here's the summary, so you guys don't have to read it. Essentially, the NHS is considering a £480 million contract for patient data management with a preference for two companies, Quantexa over Palantir. Now, the article is claiming that they're more preferable to go with Quantexa because it's a British company versus an American company. I don't know if those claims are well substantiated, right? It's just an article at the end of the day. People can write whatever they want. You actually look at the contracts Palantir has been getting to be able to help the NHS, and it's more likely that Palantir is going to get the deal. Quantexa is a billion-dollar tech firm. They aim to improve healthcare and research by linking hospital data. Their main pitch to the NHS is, look, if Palantir has all this defense industry ties, do you really want to give a contract to Palantir that might manipulate the public data? Again, unwarranted, but that's their kind of claim. Quantexa CEO Vishal Maria emphasized the importance of a British company handling NHS medical records for trust and transparency. That's just stupid. I mean, that's identity politics to an idiotic level. Like, you're British, therefore it's going to be effective. Doesn't make any sense, right? Like, you're British, you're American, but the American company is better than the British company at granular access controls and trust and data. So like you know what I mean? Like the idea that you're British and you're British, therefore the company is going to fix the NHS, it just doesn't make any sense. It's an unsubstantiated claim that really doesn't matter. And then the final point of the article is that questions are persisting about the deal's structure and Palantir's role, given its founder's controversial statements, like what Peter Thiel said about the NHS in the past. But the NHS emphasizes that they had a fair and transparent procurement process. I am going with the fact that the Bloomberg article a couple of days ago, or at this point a week ago, that reported at 4 journalists on this report that Palantir is going to get this contract. I'm going with that as like my final indicator for Palantir is getting this contract. It seems very unlikely that this random company, Quantexa, that for the past 2 years, this NHS procurement process has been going on. I haven't even heard of Quantexa. Now, apparently, I'm hearing of them. The idea that they're going to get the contract over Palantir, maybe, but I would find it quite unlikely. So all in all, I think we will get this deal. Don't know when it'll happen, but hopefully should be sometime soon. We'll get an answer. All right, final thing I want to talk about today. Founders of a new private equity firm are putting big data front and center. This broke out in the Wall Street Journal a couple of hours ago. The founders pair with Palantir Technologies for their AI-based analytics systems and aim to raise $800 million for a debut fund. So apparently, private equity veteran Gio Wideman and Francesco Barossi, I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong, started their recently formed new private equity buyout shop with data analytics software at its core, working with Palantir on an in-house system that hones its investment choices and guides portfolio company improvements. So basic PE firm, right? They buy businesses. They try to find where the alpha is. Their new firm is partnering with Palantir to develop an in-house system called New Private Equity Tower based on Palantir's AI-powered Foundry system, and offering that the technology company has developed for its corporate clients. Foundry integrates data collection and analytics with operational decision-making, according to the company's website. Now, why did I want to bring this up? The reason I think this is really, really cool that this is actually happening with Palantir, and again, the Wall Street Journal is reporting this, is because we're seeing demand for their software. So this is not going to be some major corporate company, but they're raising $800 million. You have veterans that have done private equity before, starting a new fund. And the way they're starting the fund, the philosophy and the paradigm of values that they're choosing to make this fund a good fund to give ROI to investors is, what if we have data at the core of operational decision making? And that's why they're working with Palantir to create proprietary software within Foundry to be able to make investment decisions. We saw CAS Investments in Houston, Texas is now using Palantir. Their client of AIP that was disclosed a couple of weeks ago. It seems very interesting. One of the verticals that Palantir just hasn't done that well in, which is financial services. I think our biggest client from a banking perspective is RBC, but we don't really work with that many banks because we kind of focus on healthcare, energy, supply chain. We didn't focus as much on financial institutions. You've got a brand new private equity firm, financial institution, that wants to make really good investment decisions, and the way they're thinking of how to make those investment decisions is by having a inclusive understanding, a central operating system of all their data so that they can use that data to basically make the best decisions that are possible to be able to maximize return on equity. And they're using Palantir's proprietary software in tandem to be able to build something like this. So I don't know what this deal looks like. I don't know what this contract looks like. They're raising $800 million. Maybe they're paying Palantir $20 million to build an in-house system for them. But I think we will see more of this in the future. Different companies that want to differentiate themselves through an innovative approach via data analytics will be like, what if we just partner with the leading AI data companies in the space, build it in-house for us? Palantir gets a ton of R&D for doing that, and then Palantir can build application for them that they can outsource to even other companies that want to use any of those types of resources. So I'm quite excited for the deal. I think it's really cool. I think it's really exciting. And the fact that this broke a couple hours ago seems pretty awesome that Palantir is working with a brand new firm. All right, that's it for me. Thank you so much for listening and watching. I hope you guys are enjoying the new format. Please leave a comment below what you think of Palantir advertising on the New York Times. Did you think it was a good idea, a bad idea? Do you like that they're doubling down on a political stance, or do you hate what they're doing? Let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys so much for listening and watching. Please make sure to follow me on Twitter. Subscribe to dailypalantir.com/subscribe, my free email newsletter every day. And I'll see you guys in the next one.